The walls were breathing. I swear to you, I saw them rise and fall like the chest of a sleeping animal. The air in the room had weight to it, a heaviness that clung to my skin and made my lungs feel small. The wallpaper, yellowed with age and stained by the slow rot of time, swelled outward in slow, deliberate pulses. In, like something behind it was pressing its face against the plaster, trying to feel the world beyond. I stood with my hand on the wall, feeling the push of it against my palm. A living thing behind the drywall, something with breath and hunger, something that knew I was there. The room smelled of damp carpet and old smoke, a place abandoned in spirit long before it was abandoned by people. The single lamp flickered with a tired glow, too dim to chase away the shadows that gathered in the corners. Those shadows moved when I wasn't looking. I could hear them whisper, but the whisper had no voice. It was a pressure inside the ear, a presence that formed meaning without sound. My heart beat loud enough to drown the hum of the bedside fan. Outside the window, the highway stretched into darkness. Nothing. No sound. No motion. Just the great empty night pressing close like a waiting hand. I felt cut out of the world, as if time had paused around that room and left me as the only living thing inside it. Then the wall pushed again, this time harder, as if whatever lived inside had finally found me. I stumbled back. The room exhaled. The door rattled like something outside wanted in, or something inside wanted out. I need you to understand how it began now. I wasn't planning to stop. That's the part people never believe. They think I was chasing something, or running from something, or that I had some death wish tucked behind my ribs. But the truth was simpler. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles in your bones and makes the world seem slow and far away. I'd been driving since dawn, crossing stretches of desert highway where the landscape repeats itself until you start to wonder if you're moving at all. The road was long and straight and pale as old bone. Scrub brush and sand for miles. The occasional billboard, sun-bleached and flayed by the wind. Gas station signs promising food and fuel where there was nothing but the empty mirage of heat. I had the radio on, some AM station fading in and out with static like soft rain. The voice of the preacher or talk show host or conspiracy peddler, whoever he was, drifted in words I could half hear. There are places where the world is thin, where things slip through, where the rules are not the same. I changed the station. I didn't want to hear about thin places. Not again. My eyes were burning. My hands felt fused to the wheel. The kind of highway fatigue that makes the white lines blur into one continuous ghost. I told myself I'd stop at the next town. Get coffee. Stretch. Let the world settle back into its shape. But there was no next town. Just more road. More silence. The sky turning the color of old bruises as the sun bled out behind the horizon. I've traveled a lot. I've seen things people don't talk about at dinner tables or bars or polite conversation. Things I've tried not to remember too closely. But even then, I felt a pull in that desert dusk. A kind of humming in the air. Like the road itself was leading me somewhere. Like I was meant to arrive. That's when I saw the sign. Crooked, rusted, half-lit. Vacancy. A motel sitting alone in a stretch of nothing. No nearby town. No other cars in the lot. The kind of place that seems to appear only when you're too tired to question why. I don't know why I turned off the highway. I don't know why I parked. I don't know why I walked toward that office door, dust kicking around my boots in the warm dark. But I did. And that's where everything began to go wrong. The motel looked like it had been dropped there by accident. A long, low building made of sun-faded stucco and peeling paint, sitting alone in a sea of gravel and hard-packed dirt. The sign flickered, the red neon struggling to stay alive against the darkness. The parking lot was empty except for my car and an old pickup that looked like it hadn't moved in years. The air smelled like hot dust and something faintly sweet, like old plastic left in the sun too long. Inside the front office, the air changed, cooler but stale. The smell of old carpet and bleach that couldn't hide the scent beneath it. Something wet, something lingering. The walls were lined with faded photographs of desert sunsets and anonymous mountains, like the motel was trying to convince itself of a beauty that was never there. The desk clerk was sitting behind the counter, though I hadn't heard a door open or any footsteps when I walked in. He was just there. Thin, pale, hair cut too short, eyes the color of dishwater and just as dull. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on the desk as if he had been waiting for me. "Evening," he said, but the word came out flat like he had memorized it, not spoken it. "Need a room," I told him. He nodded once, reached for the ledger. Not a computer, an actual paper ledger, pages yellowed and edges curled. He slid it toward me along with a pen that felt oddly warm, as if someone had just been holding it even though he hadn't moved his hands. "Not many travelers these days," he said, his voice soft. "Road's quiet. Gets quieter every year." I signed my name. He watched me, but not like people watch. More like how animals observe movement. No curiosity, no judgment. Just tracking. "You passing through?" he asked. "Yeah." He nodded again, slow. Too slow. "Just one night, then?" It wasn't a question. I hesitated. "That's the plan." His eyes flickered, not in surprise, but in something like recognition. "Room 6, he said, sliding an old brass key across the counter. Not a key card. A real key. Heavy. The type that knew too much history. As I turned to leave, he added, almost casually, "Walls are thin. You might hear things. Best to ignore them." I paused with the key halfway into my pocket. "What kind of things?" He smiled. Or tried to. The expression didn't fit his face. "Just the building settling. Old places make old sounds." Then, as if reciting a line he had learned long ago, "Don't be curious. Curiosity keeps a man awake when he needs to rest." There was a stillness after he spoke. A silence so complete it felt like sound was being held somewhere else, waiting. I stepped out into the night again. The desert wind had died. The motel stood quiet and colorless in the moonlight. I should have left then. I know that now. Room 6 was the last door on the row, though there were numbers beyond it. Room 7, Room 8, Room 9. All there, all with doors and little brass plates, but somehow it felt like Room 6 was the end. As if the hallway stopped there in some way deeper than what the eye could see. The gravel crunched under my boots, loud in the stillness. I remember thinking how strange it was that silence could have weight. How it could feel like something pressing down on you. The door stuck a little when I opened it. The kind of resistance that made me think of old glue or something dried and brittle holding on too long. Inside, the room smelled of dust and old linens. Not fresh dust, but the kind that settles over years, layered and unmoved. The carpet was a faded brown, stained in darker patches that the lamp's weak light couldn't fully reveal. A bed sat in the center of the room, thin blanket tucked too tightly, as though the person who made it had done so with practiced mechanical precision. The air was warm, not the warmth of a heater or a summer night. A different kind of warmth. Body warmth. Living warmth. The kind you feel when someone else has just been there, or is still there. I told myself I was imagining it. Road fatigue. The long day. The desert can play tricks on you. You start to see things in heat shimmer and fading daylight. You start to hear things in the hum of your tires on asphalt. You become open to the strange, softened to the unreal. I set my bag down. The walls were covered in old wallpaper, some floral pattern so faded it had given up on being flowers. Just shapes now, pale ghosts of what they once were. But the paper wasn't flat. It seemed to lift slightly in places, like bubbles or blisters beneath the surface. When I ran my fingers across it, the wall pushed back. Not much, just a subtle resistance. Like there was air behind it. Or space. Or something that didn't want to be touched. I drew my hand back and stood there for a long moment, watching. The wall didn't move again. Not then. Not in any way I could swear to. There was a small window over the bed, looking out onto the empty lot. No curtains, just blinds half bent and yellowed. Outside, the night pressed close. No sound of traffic on the highway. No insects. No wind. Just stillness. A silence that felt like listening. I sat on the bed. Springs groaned. The mattress felt thin as paper. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, and felt the warm air move across my skin like breath. I should have left. I should have walked out and gotten back in the car and driven until the sun rose, no matter how tired I was. But I didn't. I told myself it was only a room. Only walls. I was wrong. I didn't fall asleep right away. My body was tired, but my mind had that wired, brittle feeling that comes after too many hours on the road. The kind where your thoughts run fast and strange. Not quite dreams, but not entirely your own. The motel room was dim, the lamp casting a small island of light that didn't reach the corners. The shadows there were thick, heavy, like they were settling in for the night, too. I lay there listening to the hum of the ceiling fan. A low, steady drone. Familiar. Ordinary. Something to hold on to. Then, beneath it, another sound. Soft at first. A slow, rhythmic noise. It was faint enough that I thought it was just my own breathing echoing in my ears. I held my breath to test the idea. The sound continued. In a steady, living rhythm. The wall behind the bed seemed to swell ever so slightly with each pulse. Only a fraction of an inch, but enough to see, enough to feel. I sat up slowly. The blanket slid off my chest. The air felt thick, like it held moisture or heat, though there was no source for either. My heart beat harder. A dull, heavy thud in my ribs. I leaned closer to the wall, not touching it, just watching. The faded floral pattern moved again. Just barely, like breath rising under a sheet. I told myself it was the old building settling. Heat expansion. Thermal shift after the long desert day. Walls breathe in a sense, don't they? Everything shifts with temperature. Everything loosens and tightens. That's what I told myself. But then I heard it. A sigh. Not loud. Not even fully formed. Just the ghost of a breath. A sound a person makes when they're exhausted, or content, or waiting, came from behind the wall. My skin prickled. The hair along my arms lifted. I took another step forward before realizing I had moved. I pressed my ear to the warm wallpaper. For a moment, there was only stillness. Silence so total it felt absolute. Then, a whisper of movement. A subtle shift. The soft, wet sound of something sliding against something else. A faint scrape, like fingernails on wood, muffled and close. The breath again, slow and steady. Not mechanical. Not the wind. Human. I jerked away, heart pounding. But the sound didn't stop. If anything, it grew more definite, more certain of itself. The wall pulsed. A slow, deliberate swell. I stood in the center of the room, watching, every muscle tight, breath shallow. I told myself I was overtired, that fatigue can conjure hallucinations, that the mind fills silence with imagined sound, that the desert has its own way of playing tricks. But the wall kept breathing. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes. Hours. Time didn't feel real in that room. Not anymore. Then, from somewhere inside the wall, tap, light, precise, like a knuckle against wood. Another. Then, something, dragged, its nails, down, the inside of the wall. The room exhaled, and I wasn't tired anymore. I went outside in the early morning, though I'm not sure I slept. The air had cooled, but it carried that same thick stillness, like the world around the motel was holding its breath. Dawn had not yet broken, only a pale suggestion of light on the horizon, the color of old ash. I walked toward the vending machine near the office, thinking maybe sugar or caffeine would push away the crawling unease beneath my skin. Someone was already there. He stood with his back to me, hunched, shoulders drawn tight like a man waiting for a blow that never comes. His clothes were wrinkled and dirty, jeans dark with stains that might have been oil or something worse. His hair hung over his face, matted in places. When he heard me approach, he didn't turn. He just spoke, voice raw. You hear it yet? I froze. The question was too direct. Too knowing. What? I asked, though I already knew. He gave a hollow laugh, short, bitter. The walls, he said. This place breathes. Not all the time. Just when it's hungry. He turned then. His eyes were what struck me first. Not just tired, starved. The kind of look you see in someone who hasn't slept in days, staring too long into something they can't explain and can't escape. His face looked pale under the buzz of the flickering machine light. I should have left yesterday, he said. Should have left when I still remembered how to. We stood there in the half-dark, the motel stretching out around us like a carcass. Silent. Watching. You need to go before dawn, he continued. His voice dropped to a whisper. They wake up when the air thins. The words sat in the air like a bad taste. Who? I asked. His gaze drifted past me, toward the row of rooms, toward mine. His lips trembled, like the words were trapped behind them, pressing to get out. They're in the walls, he said finally. Not ghosts, not people, something else. Something that remembers being alive and wants it back. He swallowed. They wait for you to fall asleep. They wait for your breath to slow. They come when your guard is gone. A long silence hung between us. I opened my mouth to ask more. Anything. But he was already moving away, shuffling toward room 3. He didn't look back. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I didn't see him again. When I walked by later, the door to room 3 was open. The room inside was empty, sheets untouched, dust undisturbed, like no one had stayed there at all. I tried to tell myself I wasn't shaken, that the ragged man was just another roadside lunatic, the kind you meet when you travel too long without stopping. Highway ghosts with sunburned skin and hollow talk. But his words followed me back to room 6. They clung to my thoughts the way the heat clung to the walls. I shut the door behind me and the room seemed smaller than before. The stillness was worse in the daylight. It made the space feel sealed, like being inside a lung that had forgotten to exhale. For a while there was nothing, just the low hum of the ceiling fan and the faint buzz of old electrical wiring. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to convince myself I still had control, that I could leave whenever I wanted, that the fear in my chest was just exhaustion wearing a mask. Then the tapping started. Light, measured, rhythmic, tap, 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 not random, not settling pipes. This was the sound of someone or something on the other side of the wall signaling. I stared at the wallpaper. The faded floral shapes seemed to pulse subtly, like something beneath was shifting. I moved closer, every instinct in me screaming to stop. But curiosity is a quiet, stubborn thing. It walks you into rooms you shouldn't enter. I put my ear to the wall. First, only silence. But not true silence, listening silence. The kind that feels like it's waiting for you to speak first. Then I heard it. The breathing. Slow, deep, steady. Not mine. And beneath it, threaded through the rhythm of that breath, a whisper. My name. Not loud. Not urgent. Just spoken as if the one saying it had known me for years. As if it had been waiting for me. The sound crawled into my ear like a warm hand. I jerked back, heart hammering. The whisper didn't stop. I pressed my palm against the wallpaper. The surface was warm. Too warm. Like flesh warmed from within. And something pressed back. A swell beneath the paper. Slow. Purposeful. I watched as the wallpaper stretched outward, bulging like a bubble beneath the paint. The floral pattern warped, twisting as something pushed against it from the other side. The bulge grew, slow and steady, as if whatever was inside was testing the strength of the barrier. The shape wasn't clear, not fully, but there was a moment, brief but unmistakable, where the bulge formed a shape like a face. Not a full face, just one feature, and I, pressed from the inside, looking out at me through the thin veil of plaster and paper. The wallpaper throbbed around it. A slow pulse. In breathing. The eye moved. followed me. I stumbled back, my legs hitting the bed. The mattress springs shrieked under the sudden weight. My breath caught in my throat. The room seemed to close in, walls leaning near. The whisper came again. Closer, clearer, warm as breath on skin. My name, spoken with hunger. The bulge shifted, and the wall exhaled. I couldn't stop the sound that escaped me. A gasp. I didn't sleep after that. I tried. God knows I tried. I turned off the lamp and lay down on the stiff mattress. But every time my eyes closed, I felt the slow pulse of the walls. I could hear it now, even when the room was still. A quiet rise and fall, like the entire building was breathing in the dark, like it was waiting for me to let my guard down. Dreams came anyway. Not dreams, exactly. Something between thought and memory. I saw myself standing outside the motel, staring up at its peeling sign. Only in the dream, the building wasn't wood and plaster. It was flesh, pale, veined, living skin stretched over a shape too massive to understand. The windows were not windows, they were eyes, watching, patient. When I woke, I tasted dust and copper in my mouth, a metallic dryness that didn't go away, no matter how much water I drank. The room felt tighter, heavier, like the air had to push past something unseen to reach my lungs. I kept thinking of that other guest, the way he looked at me like he already knew I was lost. They wake up when the air thins. At first, I thought he meant the creatures inside the walls, the breathing things. But now I understood. He meant me. The room was thinning me out, wearing down something essential, making space for something else. I tried to distract myself. I sat at the small desk and opened the motel guestbook out of restless curiosity. Page after page of names, each written in the same slanted, tired handwriting. No checkout dates, just arrivals. I looked closer. The ink on the earliest pages had faded, browned with age. The most recent names, my name, were darker, fresher. I flipped toward the back of the book. Some pages had been torn out, ripped so violently the edges were ragged and curled. Just before the torn section, a message was scrawled in shaking script. The rooms remember. Below it, another line. The building doesn't rot because it feeds. My skin prickled. I felt watched again. Not from the wall this time, from above. The ceiling. The floor. Every surface listening, waiting. The realization came slow, heavy, and cold. The motel didn't contain something alive. The motel was alive. And something in it had taken notice of me. It didn't want to kill me outright. It wanted to consume me gradually. My thoughts, my voice, my sense of self. It wanted to make me part of it. And I could feel myself beginning to give way. I packed without thinking. I don't remember deciding to leave. I just remember the moment my hands were already moving. Shoving clothes into my duffel, grabbing my keys, my wallet, my boots. The room watched me. I could feel it. The air had a thickness to it, a pressure that made my ears pop. The walls pulsed slower now, like something resting between breaths, saving its strength. I didn't bother turning off the light. I didn't look back. I pulled the door handle. It didn't move. Not stuck, not jammed, just refused. As though the door had never been meant to open again. I pulled harder, my shoulder pressing into the wood. The frame groaned. The motel seemed to exhale a long, low sigh through the wallpaper. No, I whispered it. I said it to the door, to the room, to myself. I grabbed the lamp and swung it into the doorknob. The bulb burst. The shade bent. The knob didn't even scratch. Something in the wall behind me shifted. Slowly, wetly, the sound of muscle sliding against itself. I didn't look back. I slammed into the door with my full weight. Once, twice. On the third hit, it opened, not by force, but because something on the other side allowed it to. I stumbled out into the hallway. Except it wasn't a hallway anymore. It stretched far longer than it had before. The same pattern of faded carpet repeating and repeating like a copy of a copy. The lights hummed overhead, flickering in slow, unnatural rhythm. The front desk should have been visible from my doorway. It wasn't. But I could see movement in the walls. The wallpaper bulged, then drew back, as though something inside was turning over in its sleep. The clerk was gone. Of course he was. I walked fast, then faster. Then I ran. My bag bounced against my hip, my breath scraping sharp in my chest. The hall did not end. The air grew warmer, damp, the smell of metal and dust and old breath. When I finally reached the lobby, it felt like I'd crossed miles. The desk was empty. The bell was gone. The guest book was gone. In its place were faint scratches across the countertop, tiny grooves in long parallel lines, as though someone had dragged their fingernails there for hours. I didn't stop. I pushed through the front door. Outside, the parking lot stretched under a blank sky. No wind, no insects, no distant road noise. Just silence so complete it pressed against the inside of my skull. My car was there. Only, it was farther away than it should have been. 20 steps, then 40, then 100. The car didn't grow closer. The motel didn't grow smaller. The distance just extended, like the ground itself was elastic, like I was running in place inside a painted world. I stopped. The motel was breathing. The entire building rose, walls swelling outward, then sank back, slow as a sleeping lung. Something inside it woke. And behind me, from the open doorway I had escaped, a voice whispered my name, soft, familiar, like it already knew I was coming back. I don't remember how I got out. There are pieces, scraps, flashes of bare feet on cold asphalt, my bag abandoned somewhere behind me, the dark highway stretching like a thin blade across the desert. I remember running until my lungs tore at the air and my legs shook beneath me. I remember headlights cresting the horizon and the dull terror that they might not be real, but they were. A trucker let me in, asked no questions. Maybe he saw the look in my eyes. Maybe he'd seen it before. I didn't look back at the motel. Couldn't. I was afraid that if I did, I'd see it watching. I wound up 3 towns over. Hospital bed. Fluorescent lighting. Questions asked, statements taken down. They told me I was severely dehydrated, disoriented, likely suffering from stress-induced hallucinations. A sheriff came to speak to me, polite but tired. He asked where I had stayed. When I told him, he just stared. "You mean the old place?" he asked. "Off Route 19? The one with the sign shaped like a horseshoe?" "Yes," I said. He let out a slow breath, one that sounded almost like pity. "That building burned down in 1992, he said. "Lightning strike. Took the whole thing. Nothing left but scorched concrete. No one stayed there in 33 years. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only reaction my body could manage. I told him I slept in room 6. I told him about the clerk, about the guest, about the walls. He wrote nothing down, just closed his notebook and said, "You should get some rest." When I was discharged, I went looking anyway, because part of me needed to know for certain, needed proof, needed something tangible to show me that the world still made sense. The highway was the same. The exit was the same. The dirt road was the same. But when I reached the place where the motel should have been, there was nothing. Just the cracked foundation and desert wind sliding through dead grass. But I knew the air. I knew the silence. I knew the feeling of eyes where no eyes should be. The motel isn't gone. It didn't burn. It just learned how to wait. And it waits for people like me, people already fraying at the edges. I need you to listen now. Not to the story. Not to the mystery. Not to the horror of it. Listen to me, because I don't tell this to frighten you for fun. I'm not here to spook strangers on the internet or add another campfire ghost story into the pile of cheap thrills and late-night entertainment. I'm telling you because I don't know how much time I have before I stop being able to tell it at all. If you ever find yourself driving alone, too tired to think straight, the highway unspooling in red taillights and white lanes, if you see a motel with a flickering vacancy sign, sitting alone in the dark like it's been waiting just for you, Keep driving. No matter how tired you are. No matter how much your hands shake on the wheel. No matter how much your body aches for rest. Do not stop, because it doesn't just feed on the lost. It calls to them. It recognizes them. The world is full of people who are already falling apart quietly. People who are lonely, guilty, worn down to the bone, hurting in ways no one else sees. And that place, that thing, it smells that kind of pain like blood in the water. I don't know why it chose me. Maybe I was already half hollow when I arrived. Maybe something in me was already slipping. Maybe I was always meant to end up there. Sometimes I think I never really left. I moved apartments, changed numbers, threw away every reminder. I sleep with the lights on. I leave the TV playing static just to drown out the quiet. But silence still finds me. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the walls shift. Just a small sound. A slow sound. Like something settling. Like something breathing. The worst part is not the sound itself. It's how familiar it feels. Like home. So please, if you see that motel, if you see any place that feels too still, too waiting, drive. Just drive. Because once you hear the walls breathing, they have already started to remember your name.